and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the seventh edition of our International Winter School. It is a real pleasure to see you all here, and I would like to extend a special welcome to our international scholars and researchers who traveled from different regions to join us in Doha. We are very grateful that you chose to be part of this school. The International Winter School, briefly, the International Winter School is an annual gathering organized by the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. Each year, the school brings together scholars at different stages of their careers to engage critically with a timely theme. Previous editions address topics such as populism, the state and sovereignty, political culture, social media and surveillance. And last year's edition was influenced by the Western media scandal surrounding the coverage of the Gaza genocide, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and thus was titled Media at Wartime. Across these themes, the school has aimed to create a space for serious discussion, exchange, and constructive feedback. The seventh edition of Winter School focuses on post-liberalism in its different aspects. At its core lies a central question in contemporary political and social theory. Are we witnessing a structural erosion of liberal democracy or another cyclical crisis within a political tradition that has historically proven adaptable and resilient? I will not go further into this question now. More than 40 scholars are involved in this year's program across lectures and discussions of research projects, and they will address it from multiple perspectives. The program, as you can scan it in the QR code that will be visible in the screen anytime. The program includes five public lectures, 20 research projects, and 2 roundtables. These sessions bring together international scholars alongside Doha-based colleagues from the Arab Center, the Doha Institute, and other universities in Qatar. That said, I would like to briefly emphasize one point that cuts across many of our discussions. The ongoing genocide in Gaza stands as a stark illustration of the crisis of the liberal international order, the failure of the Western states to uphold international humanitarian law and to ensure accountability raises serious questions about the credibility of liberal norms, institutions, and human rights discourse. This context inevitably shapes how we think about post-liberalism today. Let me welcome you once again to this winter school, which we intentionally scheduled at this time of this year to allow participants to enjoy the unique experience of Doha in winter. And without further ado, I am pleased to give the floor to Dr. Abdelwahab El-Affendi, President of the Doha Institute, to officially open the academic program. Dr. Abdelwahab.
Thank you, Hani. I would like to join you in thanking our scholars who joined this school this year, either as lecturers or partners, or most of them also wrote brilliant papers. And I would like to first say that the Winter School, as Hani briefly mentioned, is becoming a very important discussion forum on issues of both academic importance, intellectual importance, and uh, timeliness. Suddenly, post-liberalism has become even more topical since we announced this school, so I thank them also especially. And I remind all of those who have made contribution. I think a letter from Hani came to you saying that we are going to produce a book out of the contributions, of course, with your consent, and maybe with a little bit of selectiveness, I'm afraid to say. And this, Azmi Bishara, myself, will be editing that book. Now, before introducing John, who interestingly presents a paper which gives a little bit of overview of the scene, and as usually iconoclastic. But just to give a brief introduction to the theme in a few sentences, as maybe a lot of you have done, the contributors, the issue of post-liberalism has quite a few angles. The term itself has been used mainly for ideological, possibly religious, Catholic, anti-liberal school in America, of which, to its shame, one of its luminaries, the current vice president, in Mr. J.D. Vance in America. So I think maybe they will be at the moment revising their their themes. But this is I think, in a sense, probably the most common and the most probably correct description of post-liberalism, either a kind of ideology that's putting itself as a replacement to liberalism. It thinks, as most of the anti-liberals think, that liberalism itself is flawed in its essence, and it's become more flawed now with its when it became like an ideological, militant kind of approach, where, as some of you said, it's kind of authoritarian liberalism. Not to say that liberalism was not essentially authoritarian. I think democracy was not a friend of liberalism, and liberalism was not a friend of democracy. Even the founding fathers of the United States were very cautious, if not fearful about democracy, because, like Plato, they thought it would be the rule of the mob. So they made a lot of kind of constitutional and legal safeguards to prevent democracy from appearing. And parties, they usually adopted what they call republicanism rather than democracy at their flagship. But the other approaches which were tackled or usually tackled, there was some of them I call pre-liberalism, where Europeans and EU and Americans also at time wanted to export liberalism to countries, either by use of force or by use of money or a little bit of persuasion. But this is a kind of the opposition here to liberalism is not post-liberalism, but more anti-pre-liberalism. Some of this resistance surfaced again in now Eastern Europe as a resurgence of this pre-liberalism, also in some other countries like Iraq or other countries which America tried to convince in this direction. There is also anti-liberalism, which is more broad. It could be pre-liberalism, it could be post-liberalism, it could be non-liberalism, and this is also an important aspect of looking at the issue at the moment. There is what we call also anti-liberalism, or some people call it illiberalism. There was some authors who are starting to write in the beginning of this century or even the end of that century that democracy does not usually mean liberalism. And there are some books on this illiberalism describing countries like Iran, maybe to a lesser degree Turkey. Although I must say here that I think describing Turkey as illiberal is not accurate. It may be less democratic, but liberalism is a lot, at the moment the common point of agreement between all sides of liberalism. For example, of Turkish, the pre-democratic Kemalism was, of course, very anti-democratic, but very pro-liberal. Some of the authors, for example, then began to argue that the West should not export democracy because it might bring Islamists or other so-called illiberals to power, and rather promote liberalism because that is safer. And I think the examples which were given at that time to a kind of liberal non-democracy was Hong Kong. They didn't at that time find many examples for it. But in this case, illiberalism is becoming also kind of approach. So we have to really be a little bit careful when we are describing post-liberalism, like all post. The idea of being it is different, I think, from I think one of the papers mentioned it, but not in these terms, from post-Marxism, post-structuralism, and this. But I think post-structuralism, post-Marxism, and these posts usually integrate a lot of what they are posting in their content. The post-liberals want to do away completely with liberalism and have a different approach. Just to conclude, the question is why liberalism has been and democracy, both of them, although, as I said, sometimes they're contradictory, made like a kind of, if not like Fukuyama's idea, the end of history, very popular. I think there is a core in both democracy and liberalism, in that in these systems there are supposed to be no losers. And the sense that when you say liberalism, everybody can do whatever they want, except when you harm others. But as we know, liberalism as its practice is also not like this. For example, in Europe today, any person can dress however they like, within small limits. But ladies, for example, can wear however economically clothing, but if a woman covers her head, this is looked as a national security threat, and sometimes physically attacked, certainly banned from schools or public places. And interestingly, this was also the practice in Kemalist Turkey. At that time, any lady, student, or worker covers her head, it will be like a capital crime. So, although in theory that's how should be, up to now has been a problem. Democracy, the same. If it is liberal or if it is even democracy as such, you are not supposed to be criminalized the next day your party loses power, or your adherents be sacked from their jobs. I don't know how things are now in America. It's becoming that this happens. So thank you very much again, and I'm pleased to also welcome John Keane and other old friends I'm seeing here. Or I might change this in the case of John, young friends. And I first introduce John my way. John Keane has been the founder and the chair of the study of democracy program in the University of Westminster, which became very kind of like a beacon, and a lot of discussions, a lot of important people, including Fukuyama, were invited. And I remember I was at a conference in America, and a professor, a lady, came to me and said, I always see, we used to have a bulletin. He said, I always look at that bulletin and I wish I was there in those events of yours. So it was a place of interest. And of course, before that, not many people mentioned at the moment, John was the pioneer of the revival of civil society debate. And it became, for a while also, a very dominant kind of discourse in political science, and also in politics, in the policy circles. Everybody wanted to have a civil society. We might also know that he was working underground in Eastern Europe, teaching what's called the school. What is the school called? Yeah.
It was
What's called
Underground or Flying University.
Flying University, that's his name, yes. Where he was engaged with people who became rulers after that. I don't know whether he's regretting it or not. At the moment, John is professor of politics at the University of Sydney, and he has been renowned for creative thinking about politics, history, media. I think your book about the history of democracy is a very important combination of these, including democracy and the media, democracy and the media decadence, the new despotism, the shortest history of democracy, which was translated in nearly 20 languages. He has written for the New York Times, Financial Times, The Guardian, D-Site, Hindustan Times, South China Morning Post. I don't think anybody else has done this. He has been recognized as one of the world's leading theorists, which I am one of who recognizes that. Now we'll invite John to give his paper, in which now he tells us he's not a liberal and explains why.
Shukran jazilan, Professor El-Affendi. I wanted to say thank you.
The mic on.
I start again. So, shukran jazilan, Professor El-Affendi. I wanted to say thank you, mashkur, as well, to the Doha Institute, to Mariam Henny, to Dr. Hani Awad, and to Dr. Azmi Bishara, and the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies for the invitation to come to speak to you. I wanted to say thank you too to my wife, Wei, and my daughter May for their loving support, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, salam alaikum, marhaban, sabah el khair, and thank you very much, Teslam, for coming along. Many moons ago, I was asked to speak by the organizers about whether the post-liberal moment was a paradigm shift or merely a passing moment. Little did I know in the last several months when preparing to speak to you, I had not expected that I would deliver a funeral oration to liberalism with Irish characteristics. My father was Irish. A rather joyless address to you. But that is what is about to come your way, and in 4 parts. I want to, first of all, try to clarify the meaning of this contested word, liberalism, liberalia, and to look at the handful of characteristics that typically people mean when they use the word liberalism. I want to look at a different history, to present to you a different way of thinking about the history of liberalism, which was, you may know, an early 19th century European ideology. First came into use in the 1810s. Third, I want to try to explain to you in very brief terms why it is that from the outset, in my view, liberalism as an ism was deeply flawed, and I want to say something to help our discussions about what comes after liberalism. I want to talk about the ways of thinking about the political that are currently crystallizing and flourishing in different parts of the world. I want to begin with this opening to look at Francis Fukuyama's most recent book, Liberalism and Its Discontents. I could have begun this lecture with some cheap jokes, some well-known cheap slapstick satirical jokes. You know, the old joke that liberalism A liberal, rather, is a person too broad-minded to take their own side in a quarrel, or that liberals never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, or liberals are those who feel left-wing when they are with right-wing people and right-wing when they are with left-wing people. Or the silly, serious question, what's the difference between God and a liberal? The answer, God is sure that they aren't a liberal. These are the standard jokes that you will find in discussions of liberalism today. But I want to do something more serious, and I want to look at this book by Fukuyama. As Abdelwahab has already mentioned, he's renowned for introducing the liberalism, the idea that liberalism is the end point of mankind's ideological evolution, his words. This book, I think, is a rejoinder to his critics. It's an attempt to keep that interpretation intact. It's a very problematic book, in my view, but it is a book that we should not ignore because it does make the case for the living viability of liberalism in these years of the 21st century. What is useful about this book is that it's an attempt to summarize the inner core principles of liberalism. And these are probably familiar to you. Methodological individualism, the presumption that the bodily individual ought to be the center of attention in social and political analysis, ought to be the center, so to say, around which the world rotates. This liberal individualism is, of course, articulated in terms of the right to own property, in terms of the freedom of speech, of public assembly, the freedom of religious belief. The second inner core principle of liberalism, according to Fukuyama in this book, is the autonomy of that individual, that the individual should be unrestricted in her or his movement in the world. There is, thirdly, the presumption, the inference perhaps, that all individuals are potentially equal in their capacities to be individuals. Fukuyama is, of course, willing to say in this book that the history of liberalism is uglier than that. You know, women were not extended the right to vote in the West, typically until the end of the 19th century and the early years of the 20th century. But nevertheless, liberalism is committed to the equalization of life chances of individuals. The claim by Fukuyama is that liberalism is a universal, that is to say, it's an ism that applies in every patch of our planet. He is an unapologetic champion of the view that liberalism is a universal better than any other universal on our planet in these times. And finally, there is running through this book, and I would say running through the whole history of liberalism, some assumptions about time, about deep time. What Fukuyama says in this book is that meliorism, you know, the belief that things can be made better, that the condition of individuals can be improved by various policy matters. And this meliorism is underpinned, so to say, by a not-so-secret conviction that history is on the side of liberalism, that its superiority as a political ideal is confirmed actually by the whole modernization process, or so Fukuyama wants to say. Now, this book is, and contemporary liberals are often committed to this view, this is a version of the end of history tableau. It is an attempt to make the case for these principles about which I've just spoken. I want to say in this funeral oration that these claims are false, that they are unconvincing. This is no passing moment for liberalism, as Fukuyama has defined it, as I'm going to speak about it. It is rather that there is no future for liberalism. We are at the end of a long history of that ideal. Of course, I'm going to say that liberalism will live on as a kind of pipe dream, as a kind of castle in the air phenomenon, but a castle in the air phenomenon that is losing contact with worldly realities. So perhaps you didn't expect a funeral oration, but this is, as I say, what is coming your way. And I want to begin my commentaries, my funeral oration to liberalism, by talking about the problem of liberal imperialism. What is striking about Fukuyama's book is his near silence about this phenomenon. He makes a passing reference to Pankaj Mishra, just a sentence or two, and a very dismissive one at that. What is clear when you look at the history of European liberalism is that its dalliance with imperialism was very striking. For millions of people, this dalliance proved to be a devil's pact. The claim that Fukuyama makes is that until recently, more or less this is a quotation, liberalism was the dominant ideology, globally speaking. Well, it seems to me that that's empirically very questionable. It's not the case. And I want to say a few words about the Asian region where I live, where for several reasons the spirit and substance of liberalism actually failed to take root. It's well known that European liberals vigorously promoted the acquisition and government of colonies. Professor El-Affendi already mentioned this. As in German liberalism, there's a longer version of my lecture in written form. I urge you, if you have spare time, to read it, in which I talk about the way German liberals in the 19th century were very committed to the expansion of empire. They wanted colonies. They wanted colonies because they thought this would be the best way to build a bürgerlich Germany, strong in trade, investment, strong economically. They fancied a German navy that would protect German investments, and their argument was that this would lead to the liberty, a word that, Freiheit, that appeared in German liberals' writings and speeches about the importance of empire. The whole idea, as Hannah Arendt herself put it in The Origins of Totalitarianism, is that German liberalism and other liberals actually, they wanted the never-ending accumulation of power, and they believed that the accumulation of power could come through the never-ending accumulation of capital. These liberal principles were applied in Africa, as you know, where in Namibia the first genocide of the 20th century happened thanks to the behavior of German troops. The German liberal empire had bases in Qingdao and throughout the Pacific Islands, where this liberalism was implicated, you may know, in widespread multiple crimes against indigenous peoples, violent land and resource grabs, forced labor, sexual violence, looting of treasures, white racist humiliation of people considered as savages. And it's not surprising that in this German liberal empire, there was no model liberal government that ever appeared in the Asian region. And in fact, the disasters, the setbacks, are the most striking feature of that imperial expansion, which was broken after World War I and up to World War II. The same liberal imperialist dynamic, unmentioned by Fukuyama, was evident in Britain after 1818, coincidentally the year in which liberalism first appears in English, and in the same year, it is the moment at which the British Empire controls all of what is today India and Pakistan. British liberals gushed with pride about what they called our empire. What is striking is the way that liberals, through the course of the 19th century in Britain, in the Netherlands, in Germany, and elsewhere, set aside their commitments to liberty, to freedom of the individual, in favor of what John Stuart Mill, the great English liberal, called a vigorous despotism that was needed to actually colonize and secure liberal imperialist goals. It might be thought that liberals lost sleep in their beds at night about this, that they suffered a certain cognitive dissonance. But there is actually a great study, which I recommend by Uday Singh Mehta, about India and liberalism, which points out that actually liberals, European liberals, thought of their colonies as epistemological laboratories. The idea was to experiment with peoples, to try to bring about the liberalization of these peoples on the presumption that history was on the side of these liberals, that the strangeness of the backward other could result in its improvement, replacement, or outright extermination, as in my country, of the forces of indigenous peoples, their replacement by the forces of civilized liberty. One of the consequences long-term, contrary to Fukuyama, of this liberal imperialism, this laboratory experiment, is that it permanently damaged the reputation of liberalism in the Asian region. I think much the same could be said for the Arab world. If you look at Albert Horani's great history of the Arab world, the index does not even have a reference to liberalism. In the Asian region, quite clearly, this behavior, this dynamic that I'm trying to summarize here, had ruinous consequences on the reputation of liberalism. In, for example, China, where today, 自由主义, liberalism, is actually a dirty word. Liberalism means, for the authorities in China, unbridled capitalism, destructive competition, decadent social morals, and the corrosion of family life. This liberalism eventually would unleash in the Asian region Mark Rutte-style apologies, which he made to the Indonesians for the violent behavior of Dutch troops after 1945, for instance. And more than that, liberalism bequeathed to the Asian region forms of military hardware and governmental control that were taken on, that is, were carried over in the post-colonial period. That's the case, for example, in what is today Myanmar and in Indonesia and Pakistan. The point is that a liberal coloniality of power, as Aníbal Quijano, a Peruvian sociologist, calls it, prevailed. That was, so to say, the Greek gift of liberalism in the Asia region. Let me dig deeper, because I want to say something now about the national question and liberalism's entanglement in the national question. What is interesting is that Fukuyama says nothing about imperialism because, in his view, the doctrine of liberalism isn't wrong in essence. These are his words. That is, he thinks that liberal imperialism was an unfortunate dynamic, though he doesn't say much about it, but it does not call into question the quintessence, the core principles of liberalism. Actually, what I'm trying to suggest to you here is that there is something wrong with the inner principles of liberalism. It is no coincidence that liberalism, as I've been defining it, so to say, formed an alliance with imperial projects. And it's also the case here, I'm about to try to show to you that liberalism became attached to talk of the nation and became bound up with the problem of nationalism. What is strange in this book of Fukuyama's is that he admits quietly that liberal individualism has no strong sense of community, and that the solution to the problem of community, the fact that individuals live together through language, through everyday customs, and so on, can be solved methodologically, conceptually, politically, through support for the nation. And he says that this alliance between liberalism and the nation is supported by the fact, he claims, that most peoples on our planet live in nations, that territorial nation states are sovereign. This has a certain Trump quality to it, it turns out. And therefore, that notions such as a global civil society or world citizenship is just nonsense. We live in an age of nation states, and liberalism should welcome this. Now, of course, Fukuyama champions the idea of a good nation. A good nation is a nation with liberal characteristics. But we need to ask some questions. What about if a nation prides itself on anti-liberal qualities? For example, that it's xenophobic, or that there is class privilege, or that there is religious bigotry in that nation. What do liberals say about this? Fukuyama doesn't say anything about it. What he wants to say is that a good nation is a liberal nation. But here, repeating actually John Stuart Mill's considerations on representative government, where Mill makes much the same argument about the importance of nationhood for the ideals of liberalism, I would say that Fukuyama fails to spot a double difficulty in this argument about the alliance between liberalism and nation in our times. The first difficulty is, I don't know if you've ever come across the work of Milorad Pavic, a great Serbian writer. This is a wonderful book, The Dictionary of the Khazars, in which Pavic points out that every nation, empirically speaking, is vulnerable to its own dogmatization. That is, that political groups claim that this nation is superior to other nations, and therefore, domestically, there is a crackdown on peoples, individuals, who don't agree with this position. This was the complaint of Albert Camus, who in 1943 wrote about this problem of nationalism. It's a French Revolution problem, which Fukuyama doesn't discuss. And this sentence is, I think, iconic. I love my nation too much to be a nationalist. But there's also a geopolitical problem, difficulty, I think, with the grammar of the nation and nationalism. Because insofar as nations don't live discreetly, they intermarry, they fall in love, they have children, and insofar as the borders of nations are contestable, one of the grave dynamics built in to the politics of nationhood and nationalism is the possibility of flag waving and raising by a state which conducts war on its opponents. None of this is discussed in Fukuyama, who has this idea to repeat that liberalism is the friend of nation thinking, and that this is a solution to the problem of the community dimension of living as a free individual in this world. If you think that this is all an abstraction, in the longer paper, I talk at some length about one of the really important defenses, liberal defenses of nationhood that you will find in Theodor Herzl's Der Judenstaat. It's the founding document of Zionism. As you know, this document, this pamphlet written by a liberal journalist and lawyer was one of the, as Arendt said, one of the great political imaginaries of the Jewish population. And this, if you look at Der Judenstaat, you will see that it has all of the characteristics of liberal nationalism that I've been describing. The Jewish question is a national question for Herzl. The aim of the new Zionist state is to grant liberty to all of its citizens. There is not one word about the existing Palestinian population. It is argued by Herzl that this nation state, the homeland, the promised land, as he calls it, would face geopolitical challenges. There will have to be a professional army, and this state for Jews, a solution to anti-Semitism, would have to stand firm against its foreign and domestic enemies. This is a state in which, according to Herzl, there is no democracy. Democracy is, as 19th century liberalism typically said, is outdated. The Promised Land would be ruled by a group that acted on behalf of all of its population, because after all, that population, that Jewish population, had emigrated, it had voted with its feet. And finally, you will find in Herzl's pamphlet the liberal presumption that market capitalist accumulation has to be the foundation of this new Jewish state. This new Jewish state, this Zionist state, would transform the desert into a garden. All individuals would prosper through self-enrichment. Class divisions wouldn't disappear. Paupers would be eliminated. Presumably, he refers to Palestinians, by being forced into the labor market. The middle classes would flourish, so would business. And in the new Jewish state, as he puts it, general economic progress would surely follow, because private property, which is the economic basis of independence, shall be developed freely and be respected. This brings me to, that's Der Judenstaat, this brings me to the question of neoliberalism. One thing that irritates Fukuyama in this most recent book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, is that there is a deep ambivalence expressed about liberalism's core attachment to the notion of private property and therefore market accumulation. He says in this book that, first of all, neoliberals were right in their critique of the Keynesian welfare state during the 1970s, where a major transformation began. There was excessive state control. There was a crisis, says Fukuyama, and he praises the free market wealth that's been generated since then. He has no love of the Chinese model of state capitalism. On the other hand, Fukuyama, in this book, is aware that this neoliberalism has done great damage to liberalism's global credibility, and he scolds neoliberals. His argument is that they have betrayed the central principles of liberalism. Condensed to a single sentence, we could say Fukuyama is saying neoliberalism may have badly soiled the reputation of liberalism, but liberalism and its core ideals remain universally desirable. Well, in my view, as you will see in the written paper, I think Fukuyama's reasoning on this question of property, private property and accumulation and neoliberalism, I think it's an argument a little bit like the fabled snake charmer who defends the serpent in their basket despite the harmful poisonous attacks that serpent is wielding. Or perhaps his position is a little bit like the old die-hard communist for whom Stalinism was merely an aberration, a betrayal of otherwise pure communist ideals. Well, my teacher, my mentor, my supervisor, C.B. Macpherson, who was in his time one of the great analysts of liberalism, pointed out that in fact the Fukuyama position is unsustainable. That is, liberalism is haunted by a deep contradiction that runs through its ideals. It is, and this contradiction has to do with the possessive individualism, the reliance of liberalism, the championing by liberalism of private market-driven capitalist accumulation. Well, just as Fukuyama fails to admit the problem of liberalism's partnership with imperialism and with nationalism, here too is a problem, a third problem that seems to me to dog this liberalism. Here, I would say just in passing that Fukuyama in this book has nothing to say about the crisis tendencies of market accumulation. It may be, for instance, that the fear of missing out, the FOMO principle, is at work today in the bubble developing around AI and crypto. The point is that markets have a tendency to produce crises about which Fukuyama has nothing to say. And if he had been honest, to be blunt, Fukuyama could have done what earlier liberals in the late 19th century did, L.T. Hobhouse, John Hobson, for instance, who declared their commitment to something that was then called social democracy or socialism. So this property problem, Fukuyama doesn't resolve, in my view. He simply wants to say, no, liberalism is pure in essence, it's untainted, and the problem is that neoliberals went too far. There's another problem in liberalism, which is not often discussed. It seems to me obvious. The hint is given here by the great Hungarian political economist and sociologist Karl Polanyi, whose book, The Great Transformation, published in 1944-45, is an analysis of a long period of liberalization of property in the Atlantic region and globally. And one of the things that Polanyi points out in this book is that liberals committed themselves to the weirdest, as he puts it, of all undertakings of our ancestors. They believed that nature was external to individuals, and they believed that nature could be treated as a cucumber, as Polanyi said. That is, a mere commodity that could be bought and sold on the market at will. Well, what is clear is that this liberal affinity, this liberal alliance with the anthropocentrism, its own anthropocentrism, is today coming under severe challenge. Whatever you think about the failures of green politics, whatever you think about the internal difficulties, one of the striking features of this new green politics in my lifetime is that in mechanisms like climate litigation, in cross-border agreements like the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Protection Agreement, in Extinction Rebellion, Zone à défendre type civil disobedience. In all of these actions in support of our dependence upon ecosystems in which we dwell, you will find an anti, if you wish, post-liberal understanding of representation. Let me say it very simply. If you look at the history of liberalism's understanding of representation, it's election-centered, and the idea is that we have elections in order to rotate government, this is John Stuart Mill, to prevent despotism, and through elections, through representation, the individuals come to better themselves. Notice that it's entirely anthropocentric. And what I think is striking, I hope we can discuss it, is that in the past half generation, these green initiatives transform the meaning of representation so that it becomes a relationship. They make the case for a relationship, for instance, in climate litigation cases, that we humans have the responsibility, the duty, to act as fiduciaries. That is, we act on behalf of the ecosystems in which we dwell and upon which we depend. These ecosystems can't speak for themselves. They can't organize themselves into political parties, but they can be represented, for instance, in courts of law. This is an entirely new dynamic, which requires a mental leap, I think, to understand. Fukuyama has literally not one sentence to say about it in his book. I want finally, please guillotine me if I go too long. I have a bad habit of giving Chavez length lectures. I want to say something in my funeral oration for liberalism by talking about the tectonic shifts that Professor El-Affendi has already mentioned that are taking place in world politics. I don't know why in this book Fukuyama says nothing about these. That it was published during the Joe Biden period may be a clue in which the presumption was that the United States is a defender of democracy against autocracy. I don't know, but what's striking is his complete silence about the breakup of what is conventionally called the post-1945 American-led liberal world order. It's hard exactly to say when this liberal world order began to crumble, but functionally speaking, it operated for decades as what could be called the steel dome of liberalism, a canopy under which liberalism, talk of liberal democracy flourished, in which, as John F. Kennedy said, America will stand by those peoples who are struggling for liberty in Berlin or elsewhere. Well, this steel dome, it seems to me, has since rusted, it's cracking, and it's now falling in on itself. And I think this is yet another reason why this funeral oration that I'm suggesting to you is a story of the collapse and decline and irrelevance of liberalism in these years of the 21st century. In place, what we're witnessing is a new phase of global confusion and disorder. There is also a reordering going on, which I would like to discuss, I hope, in Q&A. This is not just simply the outbreak of a kind of Hobbesian war of each against all. The Chinese are putting into place, for instance, all kinds of new cross-border institutions to stabilize this global order. But it is a period in which, as the steel dome of liberalism collapses, US decline and retreat accelerates. There are power rivalries, lawlessness, trade disputes, absurd claims, that the President of the United States has only one limit on his power, which is his own head. This is extraordinary. A period in which demagoguery is flourishing, despotic rule is also flourishing. There are also struggles to defend and extend democracy, and the return, I think, is part of the new reality, the return of an empire-building China to the world stage. The writing is on America's wall. It's not only that the legitimacy of the heartland of liberal power, the United States, the legitimacy is fraying. Its reputation as the guardian of the free world is broken. What we witness are global coverage stories of the double standards of the United States, big money politics, troop deployments into frightened communities, gun violence, loudmouth leadership, second-rate infrastructure, general social decadence led by a money-loving Epstein class. I don't know, we could discuss this, but the Epstein class is actually the product of 40 years of neoliberalism. It's what you get, a completely decadent, power and money-loving class of people that includes intellectuals, unfortunately, that we now know about. Well, it is not only this delegitimation of liberalism at home, but what's really striking, what's astonishing, is that America's leaders have now declared that they are no longer committed to the rules-based liberal international order. Why? Because their empire, fast shrinking, is no longer capable of viably defending these liberal principles, which are in any case not welcome. So if you want to have a look at what's coming to us, I urge you to have a look at the National Security Strategy memorandum just published in recent weeks. It announces, strikingly, and I'm quoting, that the days of the United States propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. It goes on to say, throwing out the liberal commitments to freedom extension by John Rawls and other American, it throws them out the window, and it goes on to say that this handbook, the National Security Strategy Memorandum, is committed, the United States is committed to an America First, powerful sovereign nation state policy. It doesn't say, strikingly, very much about China, except that the United States can help China develop a consumer economy at home. It suggests instead a suite of non-liberal principles, flexible realism. This means cancelling, getting out of all cross-border institutions that are of no efficacy to the idea of America First. The recent cancellation of 62 memberships of cross-border institutions is consistent with this document. The memorandum calls for an end to NATO expansion. It talks about the dangers of civilizational erasure in Europe. It doesn't say much more about that. It says that liberal ideology aid programs, that's its phrase, should be scrapped for the whole of Africa, that good working relations with Middle East partners committed to combating radicalism are strategically important. The most important announcement for our gathering in this winter school is that the business of promoting worldwide freedom and liberal democracy is finished. Instead, we have the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, the idea that the United States will withdraw from its global empire, and it will concentrate on the Western Hemisphere, and it will defend that Western Hemisphere, its investments, with military force if necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, you may know that exactly a century ago, at a summer school, not a winter school, John Maynard Keynes, the great English political economist, delivered an address in which he asked, "Am I a liberal?" Such were the times, the rather topsy-turvy times, in which the Liberal Party had been massively defeated in a general election the year before. Keynes addressed this question of liberalism by saying there's one thing wrong with liberalism, and that is its commitment to laissez-faire individualism. This is also my view, but what's striking is that in that speech delivered at a summer school in Cambridge in England, he never answered the question of whether he was a liberal or not. He just said that the questions that liberalism championed last century are as dead, as he put it, as last week's mutton. Well, as you have heard, ladies and gentlemen, in times very different, for better or worse, my answer to the question that Keynes raised is more forthright. For the reasons summarized in this lecture, including my early career mentoring by the master critic of liberalism, C.B. Macpherson, I've never been a liberal. I don't consider myself today to be a liberal. And because its time is up, I don't expect in the future never to become a liberal. Please don't quote me. In defiance of these dynamics, I am aware of the dangers of hubris. I am aware that at least one element of liberalism is alive and kicking. That is the commitment to the so-called free market. That is clearly the case, even in state-regulated capitalist form. I'm also aware that there will be many pipe dreams. There are already and will be in the near future pipe dreams to liberalism and its lost genius. This is the subtitle of a forthcoming book by a journalist called Adrian Wooldridge. My colleague in Sydney, Alexandre Lefebvre, speaks of liberalism as the central way of life. It seems to me it's quite out of step with the realities that I've been describing. I don't think talk of liberalism will disappear anytime soon. People will continue to describe or use the word liberal loosely to mean free-minded or free-spirited or free-handed, which is what originally it meant in Latin, for instance, in European languages. Liberalis is someone who is free in giving, generous, open-hearted, free from restraint, often linked, by the way, with licentiousness from liber, free. We are going to see many more attacks on liberals' narcissism, its identity liberalism, Mark Lilla. There are going to be more somber swan songs, such as John Gray's bitter attacks on liberalism, which for him is learning to what it means to be dumped like rubbish on the wrong side of history. And it's true that the word liberal and liberalism will appear still continue to be used in political parties, such as the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan. And I'm no doubt, as we'll discuss in the next few days, that classification struggles, Pierre Bourdieu, efforts by intellectuals and journalists and pundits to name and define the world that comes after liberalism are going to flourish. As we see, for example, in the scholarly preoccupation with Hayek's bastards, as Quinn Slobodian calls them, people like Curtis Yarvin, who are appealing to Americans to give up their republic and to form a monarchy in which the monarch is a CEO to run the United States. We're going to see and hear much more about the post-liberalism of conservative thinkers such as Adrian Famula and Patrick J. Deneen. But what I want to say to you in conclusion is that actually much more important than these classification struggles is that the fate of liberalism has already been decided by two trends that are contradictory. And I want, if I may, just to spend a few minutes talking about them. The first of these trends are described in a forthcoming book of mine on demagogues and despots, and about which Fukuyama has nothing to say. The rough idea is that an unholy alliance is developing between demagogues, Trump, Vucic in Serbia, the list goes on, demagogues who appear in so-called democracies, and when they get their hands on governmental power, begin to turn those democracies into despotisms. They destroy the independent judiciary, they attack independent media, they politicize the bureaucracy, they neuter parliaments, they concentrate power and wealth, all in the name of the people. And that, my argument is, there's an uncanny resemblance between what demagogues do under democratic conditions, on the one hand, and the new despotisms of our period. I'm thinking of Erdogan's Turkey. I'm thinking of the Chinese Communist Party and others. What is striking about this despotism as a form of rule is that it is anti-liberal. When Vladimir Putin says that the liberal idea is now obsolete because it's lost the support of the majority of the population, of the populations in the West. Here's a symptom of the way that this despotic power represents itself. It is not correct, in my view, to use the words authoritarianism, tyranny, autocracy to describe these regimes. What in fact is very striking about these regimes, and here I'm thinking about Turkey, I'm thinking about China, is that those who rule use a mishmash of signifiers to govern. There is no grand ideology. You know, Xi Jinping on a Monday is a socialist. On a Tuesday, he's for free markets. On a Wednesday, he speaks about ecological civilization. On Thursday, he speaks about ancient Chinese traditions. And on Friday, he will speak about Confucianism. None of this adds up, but this is a quality of despotic rule. And what is striking about this despotic rule, which replaces liberalism, is its constant commitment to the people, constant references to the people, and not only that, but the experiment of a top-down form of governing, an experiment with all kinds of democratic mechanisms. For instance, happiness forums. For instance, periodic elections. For instance, online public Q&A portals. Or in China, the 12345 citizens hotline. You can dial on your phone 12345 and you will actually have a government bureaucrat who will pick up and help your request. Public opinion sampling, anti-corruption agencies. These despotisms, in short, are phantom democracies, and my point is that this form of power has already replaced the liberalism that Fukuyama speaks about, and it is already 2 minutes, it is already building cross-border institutions such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or BRICS as a replacement of that steel dome that I spoke about. Finally, I want to say, on a more defiant note, a few words about democracy. If you look at some developments of our times, you will see that there is a second countertrend. It's the spirit of democracy that seems to me to be alive and well. It's important to remind you that democracy as an ideal with Eastern origins, in my view, long predated by some 2,000 years liberalism. It's also true, Professor El-Affendi mentioned this, that liberals were often, usually, hostile to democracy. It's also true, it seems to me, that in our times, in this post-liberal moment, that there are things going on that are counters to the despotic trends and signal the end of liberalism. Let me mention that in South Korea, several corrupt presidents have been impeached after pressure from street-level protestivals. This is a Korean invention. Or in Morocco, consider, in defiance of government restrictions, how the spirit of democracy surfaced in the ranks of football fans who erected banners chanting, "God help Palestine," and sung songs in solidarity featuring lyrics such as, "You for whom my heart is saddened." Or how in Bangladesh, garment workers have been struggling to form trade unions. Or in South Africa, the Zondo Commission, an anti-corruption commission, is investigating corruption in the public sector. What binds together these disparate actions is, it seems to me, a spirit of democracy. It has nothing to do with liberalism, as far as I can tell. It shows that democracy is a spirit and a substance committed to the equalization of life chances of people and the protection of the ecosystems in which they dwell. Democracy is opposed to abusive, arbitrary power. It wants accountability. This is its very old meaning. It is alive, and I would say, well, whether it survives is another matter. Notice that democracy, like water, has no predefined form or substance. It's therefore wrong, I think, to expect that its spirit will crystallize into some new world order. This is not the way to think. But what I think we're witnessing is that democracy, the spirit of democracy, is a clear successor to that of liberalism. Ladies and gentlemen, I've taken too much of your time. I want to say that in our none too beautiful world, in which bullying of the weak by the powerful is nowadays flourishing, the spirit of democracy calls on people to hold back the night and draw back from the brink. The spirit of democracy harbors the conviction that shitty situations can be fertilizers of a different and better future. It urges people to imagine and believe in the practical possibility that our tiny spinning planet we call Earth, against all odds, despite everything, that people stripped of the illusions of liberalism and despotism can indeed refuse arbitrary power and live more fairly, non-violently, and with dignity in the company of different others they regard as their equals, not as their enemies and victims. Shukran. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We'll have now some time for questions, please. Sari.
Thank you so much, John, for this amazing talk. Pierre Bourdieu, if you look to his writing, you see how much he, in the early writing, cursed welfare state, and when it was an assault to welfare state, how he defended. So context matter. And you give this talk in an area where neither democracy nor liberal, even liberalism as a thin theory is there. So context matter. I mean, addressing to us in the Arab world, I mean, do you think there is no, I mean, can we disentangle some element in liberal tradition that we say we need to keep it, while we throw other? Because you leave us without alternative, and really this is this very dangerous. I mean, I think we need just one word another. I mean, you didn't talk about Jean Rawls, you didn't talk about communitarian liberal, McIntyre, Sandel. I mean, I think they address many of this content that you talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll take the question.
I can take notes.
Yes, I appreciate the broad and depth of a presentation within a few minutes. I want to pose one question, and let me start with 1848 and the revolutions of 1848, where we have ideals of liberation from hegemonic empires, and we have the idea of nationalism as married with these ideals of liberty in the 1848 revolutions. So nationalism was seen as the wing for liberation. There was a marriage between nation and some ism. You want to call it liberalism, but we could call it any other ism possible. So there is this dual thing, nation and ism. Now, this, I think, you conflate it with another binary thing, which is nation and nation, as expressed in Zionism and in Trumpism. The New World Order is that it is really a combination of Zionism. I kind of separated from the other kind of liberatory nationalism of the 19th century. And so I think we need to explore more, differentiate more between the ideals of the 19th century of nation and ism, and there is probably a contradiction. Where that contradiction now is done and over, we have simply a new ideologies spearheaded by Zionism 100 years ago, but with Trumpism now, which is a nation/nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So thank you for this diversified take on why.
If you can, your name, please.
I'm Shaima Gammoudi. I'm first-year student here, comparative literature. So thank you for your diversified take on why are you not a liberal. I have two questions. What is your take on the theory that the end of history of Fukuyama is nothing but an ideological discourse that celebrates the triumph of not a social theory but an economic system on another, and as an attempt to academize capitalism into an intellectual property? So it's nothing but it should stay on the American shelf. It should not be discussed as an international, into an international arena. The other question is, if the political discourse is focused on the economic wealth of a specific portion of people, therefore power, doesn't that mean that liberalism developed into a monster, that it is unstoppable?
Sorry, a monster that...
It's unstoppable.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. I'm Walid Al-Saqaf, Associate Professor in the Journalism Department. And when you raised the AI phrase, it brought to me the question of the work that we're doing at the Journalism Department, that we're analyzing how AI models look into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict historically, and how it evaluates the current events. And so one thing that stood out, and maybe it connects to the soft authoritarianism aspect, is that constantly when you bring in the human rights aspect and the complexity issue, AI always brings back the notion that you cannot bring this in simple terms. It is an overly complicated topic, and that's a way of pacifying the reader from continuing on giving an opinion. So don't you see this as a form of soft authoritarianism that could reverberate and automate the automatically resulting killing public opinion if it's being depended on every single day? When you come into a question about how to justify the killing of Palestinians, it says it's overly complex. It's not simple. The Silicon Valley liberal thoughts of trying to be soft on complex issues is now spilling over to the public domain. How serious is that? Thank you.
Okay, over there. Yes. Yes, you.
Thank you, Jacob Williams. So you've given a presentation that I think has a lot in common with what right-wing post-liberals like Patrick Janine would say, insofar as you're making a kind of structural argument. You know, look at these nice values Fukuyama has. In reality, when you implement those values, bad things happen, and that isn't a coincidence. It's because of structural characteristics that are built in to the consequence of applying those principles. In the case of nationalism, liberalism erodes communities that are more organic. People turn to the nation state. That results in imperialism. Now, is the argument therefore not vulnerable to the same kind of response that liberals like Andrew Koppelman make against Deneen, which is that, well, you've taken this family of political moralities called liberalism that is very, very internally complex and diverse, and said there's this structural dynamic that is attached to implementing that family, but that dynamic may attach to some versions of liberalism more than others. It may attach to different versions to different degrees. So is it not too easy, therefore, to just throw out the whole family of liberalism because of some structural problems that may be built into some conceptions, some instantiations, and some versions of it?
Okay, last question there.
Hello, my name is Ala. Thank you for coming. I wanted to say that based on your critique of the centrality of human representation in liberalism, can we say that the flaw goes beyond the political mechanism of representation to affect the very ontological structure that precedes political action? And does the post-liberal moment require a radical reformulation of the concept of being, one that transcends the illusion of separation between humans and other living beings in order to enable justice that does not stop at the limits of species?
Okay. Yes, okay, you can have the last question.
Thank you so much. My name is Mohammed Zaidan. My question is related to Dr. Sari's question about the implications of the idea of the post-liberalism line of thinking in regions in which the spirit of democracy is already dead or dying. There is a scary element in this idea, especially in relation to the use of the idea of the end of liberalism in attacking the aspirations to democracy. Obviously, there are aspirations to ideals related to liberalism that are unfortunately related to the idea, but can be used against the ideals of democracies as well.
Okay, I think we should, if I may add another question. I think what you have been trying to say that the practices of anti-liberalism, I wouldn't call it post-liberalism, in the United States nowadays, in other countries in Eastern Europe, and now seems to be approaching the UK. These practices are both anti-democratic and anti-liberal, in the sense that, for example, you arrest people who are safely, peacefully, for example, protesting for Palestine, and so on and so on. So maybe we don't have anything left now, either democracy or liberalism. But I'll leave that to you. About 5 minutes, please.
Well, shukran, everybody. I mean, I was anticipating, I have a whole page here of notes anticipating these kinds of questions. I suppose it's my comeuppance because having presented to you a rather inelegant, Bowdlerized summary of a long paper which I wrote, I know that by covering so much territory, the blowback surely is deserved, and these questions are very much to the point. I hope that in the next few days we will discuss them. Perhaps I should begin by saying something about democracy. I feel that I didn't have enough time to elaborate. Really, the work that I've done in a sad life, I did nothing else but think about the past, present, and future of democracy and broadcast, and try to reimagine democracy for our 21st century. I do not mean, as many political scientists do, that democracy is equivalent to free and fair elections. I do not mean that democracy is equivalent to crowd assemblies, that is, to deliberative, so-called deliberative democracy, about which there's been a big fashionable trend in recent years. What I've tried to do in my work, and which I said very briefly to you this morning, is that if you think about, so to say, the quintessence of democracy, and think about it in the most ecumenical way, it is a global ideal. It's a global ideal because it puts on the table the question, is any particular group entitled to and good enough to rule unconditionally without accountability? This is the core problematic that democracy puts its finger on. And what I wanted to say to you is that liberalism was, at various points, a carrier of the same kinds of question, much more contradictory than democracy. But democracy has outlived and will outlive liberalism, and it has, it seems to me, the potential to remain a fugitive in our world. It will operate, is operating in the United States as it is in China, for instance. So democracy is its spirit and in substance. It is a way of life in which there is a commitment of peoples, a lived commitment to the belief that they can become equals of others, that nobody is good enough to rule unconditionally, and that people are capable, therefore, of applying, in a precautionary sense, checks and balances against that power. That seems to me to be a principle that liberalism historically sometimes had affinity for. It often contradicted it, for instance, in imperial settings. It's true that I deserve criticism for my generalizations, and it's a little unfair. In the paper, did mention John Rawls. Of course, I did not talk about the communitarian critique of liberalism. That's another lecture. When asked, as someone has, is there anything worth rescuing from liberalism? That was a question that haunted my mentor and supervisor, Brough Macpherson. The short answer is yes. The commitment to civil and political liberties is worth retrieving. But if you look at the way those principles are entangled in a kind of fetish of the individual, a commitment to private property through thick and thin, the belief that history is on the side of liberalism, I mean, these are precepts that I wanted to throw out the window. And so, yes, it is possible to retrieve, as Macpherson liked to put it, the best of liberalism, but that will take us very much into, so to say, a democratic way of thinking. We could have a long discussion about nations and nationalism. I only wanted to shock you a little bit by introducing Theodor Herzl's Der Judenstaat. I mean, a self-declared liberal who put the case for a political solution for anti-Semitism, a vision of a liberal state that would be established in Palestine, in which individuals, Jews, would flourish as individuals, they would enjoy liberty, etc., etc. And we now know, I said nothing about it, what became of that liberal vision of a Zionist state. It is, for me, confirmation that nationalism bothers me a great deal. It is a product in the modern world of the French Revolution. And my point was that all emphases on nation risk the dangers of nationalism, which is violent, etc., power concentrating, etc., etc. And we are going to witness this. Yes?
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute and 7 points to go. About the end of history, yes, I mean, Fukuyama is still at it. This book, if you read it, Liberalism and its Discontents, is a kind of rejoinder to his critics. He still hasn't given up the idea. And yes, it is an alibi of commodity production and exchange, and it's an appeal to a certain understanding of intellectuals. Yes, it should stay on the American shelf, to quote our questioner. I can't, in this 40 seconds remaining, talk about AI, but I hope there's another occasion when we can. I have been writing about this recently, and of course it calls into question a lot of liberal presumptions. About the ontology of the individual, yes, it seems to me that the more you look at the history of liberalism in practice and in thought, the more you see that it has this very constricted, very confined ontological understanding that we are quintessentially individuals. This, it seems to me, is highly questionable, and you don't have to have read Heidegger, or you don't have to have read the social liberals, or you don't have to have read much of the history of democracy to see that this is a fraudulent notion, which Fukuyama is still committed to. I take very seriously the suggestion that my critique of liberalism has family affinities with the right wing. It seems to me that I have in mind actually something quite different than Deneen and others. But I do agree with your remark that contrary to Fukuyama, who wants to protect and defend the core principles, which he claims do not suffer any fleur du mal. There are no diseases in those principles. It seems to me Deneen and others are right that inside the core principles of liberalism, as they have operated in national contexts, there are difficulties. That's what I also wanted to say. Yes, there are regions of our earth where the spirit of democracy is dead or dying. One of the great questions raised in this paper is whether we are going to see a post-Steel Dome, post-1945 liberal world order in which China will choose or be pushed into being the leader of the non-liberal world. I mean, I have written a book on the emergent Chinese empire. The leadership is very cautious about this possibility, but it is possible. It is possible that we are living in times in which, in various patches of the earth, in Southeast Asia, in Central Asian republics, in parts of Africa, this empire will be the coordinating beyond liberal power we are going to see. And as for democracy, I wish it well in the United States, but if you look at what is going on, the Trump administration is accelerating trends that have been deep for some time, in which the ideals of liberalism and the ideals of democracy are being junked. This I never thought I would see in my life, but it is what we are witnessing. The politicization of the judiciary, the politicization of the bureaucracy, the taming of Congress, the destruction or seduction of parts of the media, now the New York Times, to be supportive of Trump, the militarization of domestic politics, the growing inequality of the social order. I mean, these are all features of the Trump administration. It's as if the very ideals of liberalism are being destroyed in their heartlands.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you all for being here. I think the next meeting will be in the other room, in the other building.
Thank you very much, participants, all people involved in the academic program, Doha Institute faculty also, and registered students and guests are welcome to move to the other building where closed sessions will start. We will guide you.